Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining. I'm going to give just another 30 seconds or so, and then we will get started today. Let's slowly get the ball rolling here. My name is Tal Kitron with Alperuth Tutoring Services. I work as a premium tutor, teaching mostly SAT, PSAT, ACT, and some LSAT, and then also as an executive function coach. Today, we're going to talk about executive function skills, what they are, how to enhance them, how to build them. I'm anticipating probably about 45 minutes of presentation time, and we should leave some time for Q&A at the end. So if questions do arise, please put them in the Q&A, and then we'll make sure we address those when we get to the end of the presentation. I've been with Alperuth for a little over 10 years in various capacities. It's a great company, and our cornerstones are academic tutoring, test prep, and then executive function coaching. So if you feel like you're a student or have a student who needs support in any of these areas, I can give you the links at the end to reach out. But today I want to talk about executive functioning and what it is. It's a very, like the definition was very high level, so I tried to make this as understandable as possible in layman's terms. What executive functions are is a set of processes that everyone has in different balances, and they're necessary for behavior control. So executive functions help us manage ourselves and our resources. They help us decide how to set goals, and then they help us select and monitor behaviors that will help us achieve those very goals. Among this is organizing, planning, thinking through solutions, and controlling impulses, right? So this is all instead of just acting impulsively. And again, these are skills in a spectrum that can be developed and improved over time. That's why executive function coaching is a thing, both for children, adolescents, and adults, because we all have them and we can all improve our executive function skills. And these are not just for academic success or support. When we're coaching students with executive function skills, it's really to help them succeed in day-to-day life. Because if you're better at planning and organizing and prioritizing, that's going to translate into your day-to-day activities. But again, you may see someone who's really, really good at time management, right? They can set it aside when they're sitting working, but they're not good at planning or prioritizing certain tasks. And others might be the opposite. So you kind of have to get a feel by thinking about what you do, and then that will help you unlock which of these skills you're stronger or weaker at. So coming up, we've got a PE test for a lot of people in a couple of months. And I know Alperuth has a ton of workshops, and we're very focused on helping students prepare for APs. And then shortly thereafter, or sometimes in the midst of APs, is final exams. So part of today will be in the lens of how do I set myself up for success on those tests, right? So if you're feeling already that little bit of buzzing anxiety of upcoming tests, hopefully today can give you some ideas for how to plan for that on the front end. So skills we've mentioned include organizing, planning, prioritizing, and time management. There's also a big part of this is how to set goals and how to behave and persist in our behavior towards those goals. And then the cornerstone of executive functioning, in my opinion, is metacognition. This is thinking about the way we think. If a student gets really good at understanding, oh, this is why I went wrong, this is where I went wrong, here's what I do differently, that can change their ability to access the other skills. We'll become better planners, right? We become better at this at time management next time. And so metacognition is in the interest of trying to plan ahead. So if we're working, like, let's say, for example, the SAT is coming up in March and another one in May. So if I'm planning out tutoring sessions and a study plan, I'm going to work backwards from those dates, right? Making sure that we're entering into those dates with confidence, momentum, comfort. Same thing can be done for a final exam, right? So you have to really think about, okay, well, it's due on this Friday, but the last office hours for the teacher are on Wednesday. So I need to have my final draft really done on that Tuesday. It seems minor, but thinking about that ahead of time can save a huge time crunch at the end of the semester. And really, this is about proactivity rather than reactivity. So that's part of what we're training ourselves to do. When I say all steps, like as a coach, I don't want to think that any step is too simple. So for me, maybe, well, let's write down this assignment and I know what that means. But if a student really struggles with keeping things organized, we need to know, all right, where are you writing down this assignment? And then where are you keeping that? Do we have a paper and a digital copy? How is this is this in a different place? US history, is that in a different place from environmental science? How do you differentiate? Right? Is there a textbook associated with those? Where do you keep it? So really getting down into the details to see if there is a gap, where it's happening. This slide is about metacognition. I always want to frame executive function from a place of curiosity. So these are questions that I would ask and just kind of toss to the student and try to work through together, right? As a coach, you do not want to be a guru teaching them, here's how I would do it, here's how you should do it. It's figuring out the individual person, what has worked and what doesn't work, right? And then finding and building a system. So if we've got these APs coming up where you've got a challenge that you want to perform well on, it's important to think about prior successes and failures. So last time I did well, what worked? Last time that it didn't go so well, what happened? What should I not do again? Right? What else could I maybe employ that my friend said worked? Right? What's my goal and how are the strategies helping me get there? So thinking about the way you're thinking and what you're doing. In thinking about the way we think and the way we operate, you'll start to find patterns. So that's a big part of knowing your skills. So some people have testing anxiety, but then they can kind of have this thought of, I'm bad at tests, right? It's important to actually be mindful of how you've historically performed. There've probably been successes. Let's harness those. And in the times that it didn't go well, sometimes it was just that week, had a crazy week, didn't get sleep, something happened at home. So maybe I don't need to modify how I prepare. It was just a freak thing. But in a lot of instances, I'm studying maybe in the wrong place. I've got too many distractions. I'm not taking proper breaks and so on. So ask yourself, like, do you go into a test feeling like I'm going to nail it and then we don't? Or are we just going in feeling, I don't know this, I'm not doing well, and that's a self-fulfilling prophecy sometimes? Or do you do a pretty good job of predicting how you will do? Right? That's an important thing to understand. And if your patterns aren't working, we have to shift, right? And slowly build a new system and create new patterns. This is different for every person and it takes a lot of work and thought. So one thing I always like to talk about is let's establish goals, because if you don't set the goals, then it's hard to hone your behaviors that we need to facilitate achieving those goals. So let's say we've got a target GPA. So for each class, this is my target grade. Here's some example. So like, let's say I'm shooting for an A or B in every class. So let's look at what you've got, right? Because not all of these are created equal. In AP World, I have an 88.4. I need to get an A, but a low A to achieve an A in the course. So I'm going to prioritize AP World because I'm so close to an A and I just need to do really well on that test. As an environmental science, I mean, I've got a high A. I could do really poorly and I probably won't. So I'm not going to study that much for that, just enough to know that I've got it basically down like I have all year. Algebra 2 grade is an 84. Now, if it's honors, we've got that extra wrinkle of 7. So a lot of schools add 7 points to that. But let's say our honors grade with those 7 points is an 84. Well, I need to make sure I don't drop to a C. It's unlikely I can get to an A. So I'd still prioritize this one fairly heavily, but maybe not as much as AP World. And then same with honors Spanish. If it's an 80, that could easily drop down to a C, and I really don't want that. My goal is A's and B's. So that's going to take a ton of focus. right? And just thinking about that, and then you can go into like, okay, what is going to be on this test? Let me make sure I'm not surprised by anything, and reviewing notes, etc. Prioritization is defined as allocating more time towards the most critical tasks. So part of that will be figuring out for yourself which of these tasks are the most important. Where's the soonest deadline? What am I at most risk of either dropping a grade, or where's the highest opportunity I can boost my grade? So just like we saw, if there's tests that you feel confident about, that you're like, yeah, my grade's pretty good. I know I'm doing well with this. I'm not going to be surprised by anything, right? I'm in good shape on this class. You don't need to spend as much time on that test versus some tests we'll have to spend more time. Again, seems obvious, but a lot of people just don't do that far enough in advance. So what can we do as far as a study plan? And I'll give different tools and things we can do throughout today, but make sure first off that like you're not overwhelmed by saying, I've got to study for finals, plural. You have to break it up into discrete subjects. And then is when you decide how much time to allocate. And you also have to think about what are my best resources. So consult the syllabus, consult your peers and the teacher, right? Make sure you ask for help if needed. Then think about timing, right? If your test is on Wednesday and the next one's on Thursday, that might take some creative planning for when to study for each. You won't be able to guess exactly how much time everything will take, but we can estimate, right? So I think I need 5 hours. So let me set aside like 4 hour-and-a-half blocks. That should be plenty. So before you start reviewing, just like before you start writing an essay, the planning part is key. We need to do that. I'm also always working to try to unlock the motivation. So some students are just intrinsically motivated to succeed. They just are hard on themselves, or they just want to do well. Others are motivated by scholarship opportunities, or by just parents being pleased or not being angry. It's really important to find that internal goal, right? So more than just, well, I want mom and dad to be happy. It's okay. Well, my goal is this is my grade, and like you try to get to the bottom of like how does the student feel about this class and this teacher, and are we feeling like this is the best grade I can achieve? If you can unlock that thought of, okay, I think I can do better, and that's the key, because then we work on how. But all we need is that buy-in, right? And to be motivated, you want to set specific goals. So if it's multiple choice and there's 100 questions, right? Make sure if whether it's curved or not, you need to know going in exactly what you can miss and what you're going to expect, right? And then you can take practice tests, and the whole thing is like, I've got this goal in mind. So then that helps you understand if your progress is on target or not. So we'll talk a little bit now about how to learn things and sometimes forget them, but how to ultimately remember them. There's a few strategies that can really help us lock things into place. So this person, what's his name? Herman Ebbinghaus, did a study, and he basically measured his memory when he learned something. So he studied something, and he studied it for a day, and then he would measure it a day later. And then he did these increasing review sessions, and he found that with each review session, after waiting a couple more days, 2 days, then 3 days, then longer, the amount he retained increased. So all that means is, of course, we don't get something locked in right away. We can learn it. And even if it leaks out of our brain a little bit, when you review it later that week, and then again in a month, that's how it sticks, right? So test prep is definitely like that. So he saw that like without reinforcing anything or any sort of linking of ideas, because remember, we need to link ideas together. Can't just have them kind of out in the ether. If he didn't link those ideas or reinforce them or review, then he's losing like over half of it in an hour. And a week later, he's lost 75% of what he learned. Speaking from experience, that happens, right? I've learned and forgotten so many things in my life. And even my students in high school who are juniors, they're thinking of geometry as like eons ago, and they can't remember a lot of that. So refresh it again. Eventually it's locked in. When he studied 3 times in 3 days, so each day, then he remembered this knowledge much longer, and every study interval increased the strength of his memory over time. So it's okay to forget things. We just have to then recap them. I think these are some cool tricks. So just think about like if you do these and try them. I think that all you can do as a student is try these things and see what works and what doesn't. And as you hear them, some of them will be like, yeah, I like that. And others you'll be like, I'm not doing that. But like for me, in my older age, a short nap does wonders. It also is helpful to retain information. So if you learn something and then you take a quick nap, there's actually studies that show that you retain more information than if you learn it and then go do something else. What we mean by interference breaks is like you don't want to just sit and learn and learn and learn, right? You need a change of scenery or a nap or a walk or something to help that kind of sink in. And if you're just sitting in one place, learning, 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 there comes a point of diminishing returns. So this is just something you got to think about, like as you're studying for APs and finals. I'm huge on break time. I think that if you have like a Google Calendar app or something like that, which you should, when you're scheduling review time for APs or finals, you should schedule break time too, right? And I'll show you an example of that in a moment. For me, like I'm a recovering lawyer. When I went to law school, many of my friends would pull all-nighters, and that was just kind of the thing they did, right? They would work all night in advance of a test. Um, that didn't work for me. I would work until maybe midnight, 1, 2 a.m. at most, but then I got tired and I realized I'm not retaining this information. So what worked for me was I would then sleep for 4 or 5 hours, wake up at 5 or 6 a.m., and then I'd have a couple hours to actually review and kind of fine tune. And I don't know if it was the sleep or just the fact that I had a little bit more rest, but that strategy worked well for me. If you're a morning person, maybe you need to knock more of your stuff out in the morning, right? Or if you can do stuff at school, then understand when and how you can do that. And then I think a little tougher would be when do we do the hardest thing? So some people are going to benefit from doing that first. Others might want to get the ball rolling with an easier subject and then ease their way into the tougher thing. Probably wouldn't save it for last though, just for obvious reasons. You don't want to save your toughest thing for last. I cannot emphasize break time enough. So for students with learning differences, like if you have ADHD, for example, by definition, we are lacking in certain executive function skills, planning and prioritizing and time management and so on, and impulse control. So especially for those students, taking breaks is even more important, right? If you just do the same thing for an hour, 2 hours, it's not going to stick. So like every 30 minutes or at least every hour or so, take a short break. Active breaks are better than like going on to an app or on your phone or just making sure that you're not going down a pathway that you know will take you a lot of time and really derail your study time. Small breaks, take a snack, get a snack, drink some water. I know a lot of my students drink coffee in high school amazingly, but that could do it. Just we're trying to replenish our glucose stores and just be a little bit more rested. It's just kind of not passive. One thing students can do with like their stopwatch lap function is really measure timing, right? Let's see how long this question is taking, hit the lap button, and then keep going as you go to see at the end, where did I take too long? The danger, of course, with using the phone is obvious, can cause other distractions. So maybe you get a lot of EF coaches like these other little timers, right? So you set it for an hour, these Pomodoro timers, and then or set it for 50 minutes, 10-minute break, right? That's various schools of thought on that. But you do want to keep good boundaries. Understand if you're reading something and thinking, gosh, I don't know what I just read, because we've all been there, maybe put it down, rest for a while, and come back to it. You're going to be better off that way. We touched on interference earlier. So this is about working memory, which is the amount of information we can hold in our brain in a short amount of time. And again, things are going to leak out, right? I can't keep too much in my brain, right? Because then like one thing's going to come out. Um, that is a result of competition among the old bits of information in your brain and the new. And again, a little bit of activity after studying, so a short walk, change of scenery, or a short nap can really have a positive effect on your recall later. So that's interference, meaning disrupt it with something healthy, productive, right? And then come back to it later. If I'm doing a SAT class, unless it's a rare situation where someone only needs math help, I think it's really important to switch it every 20, 30 minutes. And when I was teaching in a classroom with like 30 students, it was even more important. Because if you drone on as I'm doing today, right, with on the same topic for an hour, you will lose the interest of some folks. If you can keep it light, right? So I like as a teacher, I would say, all right, we've got 20 minutes of this, and then we're going to switch, dangling that little carrot. And then 20 minutes after that, we're taking a short break. Right? If you have that little thing at the end of the line that you're hoping for, it does keep people engaged. And you can do that on your own. People sometimes are worried, well, I'm studying for 8 push, I'm not going to just switch to math. But weirdly, it's good. It's really helpful. A break to a brand new topic isn't going to cause you to lose everything you just learned, right? You're much more likely to actually gain information without stuff leaking out. When you stick to one topic, so 8 push, 8 push, 8 push, you will get more interference and you will get less encoded in your brain. So it's more likely that you'll have that forgetting curve where you lose some of it. So that means as you review, think about how you can mix it up. So maybe you don't go straight through in the unit from chapter 1 through 12. You go like 12 to 5, bounce around. Um, Stopping and starting is a good thing, but it does require motivation, right? So if you know you're someone who struggles with task initiation, this will be harder for you because all these breaks mean I got to stop and then I got to come back and start again. Mentioned walking and outside. I mean, nature and outdoors when the weather permits is really crucial. Just 10 minutes outside, even honestly looking at pictures of the outdoors has shown that it gives you some of those beneficial effects, right? It restores us. It allows us to not kind of have these hyper focused, attention pathways. We need that reset, that reboot. So students aren't going to do this, right? They're more likely to be on their phone for 20 minutes. And I will just say that a walk outside off the phone is going to be a way more productive way to rest your brain. While it's important to have a dedicated study space that's clear of clutter, moving around can help. So when I did this when studying for finals in undergrad and in law school, where I wouldn't just only study in my dorm room or in the library, right? I would try to go outside. I was in Miami, so that was easy. And then as soon as it started raining, which was every couple minutes, I would go inside. And switching spots, but learning the same information can help you retain it better. Sometimes it's just like you have this moment on the test where you're like, oh, what is that? And then you have the thought of, okay, well, I remember I went from the dining hall to the library and then I studied this there, right? So you'll be surprised at how much you can actually recall just based on where you were. We're going to talk about making what's easy hard and what's hard easy. Meaning, if you know that you always get on Snapchat or Instagram or a Discord server or whatever it is, and you know that that's your downfall, and when you go on that phone, you're going to be on there for like 30 minutes, 45 minutes, an hour, you really get time sunk into it. You need to make that harder to access. And then if it's hard for you to initiate tasks and you don't like doing homework and you just don't want to do it, we need to make that more appealing and easy. Part of that is just managing your environment so that it's clear of clutter, more disciplined. And that's both digitally and analog, so in real life. So, right, this picture gives me anxiety. I don't know about anyone else, but if you are studying in a place like this, that clutter and overstimulation can really interfere with our learning. And students flat out do worse in cluttered learning environments than in cleaner, more spare environments. So the room needs to be cleaner, right? We've got a desk with all our resources, scratch paper, pens, pencils, right? This looks much better. And even if we are using different settings to retain information, right, and give us cues, I still think we should have a main study area where distractions are at a minimum. And maybe you can chew gum, and that helps. Some people can listen to music. Not many can multitask like that, but for some people it helps. But think about what actually helps versus what you just enjoy, right? Because some students say, oh, I can multitask, I can have the baseball game and do my work. And no, they really can't, not effectively. By far the main thing with all this, as people probably know, is the phone. And I have to do this too, right? So there are certain times where I have to get something done, but I'm distracted by texts from friends or by, sports scores or something. And so I have to put my phone in airplane mode or charge it on the other side of the house, right? And just doing things to force myself to be focused and not allow those easy pathways to go down. And then digitally as well, right? A lot of my students have like 12,576 new emails. Stressful. So think about how many tabs are open. Do you have easy access and bookmarks to what you need? Do you have all these apps that are giving you notifications, right? Can you deactivate some of those, manage notifications, delete some apps, especially while you're attempting to do real work? So we have to Marie Kondo and just clean slate everything. And this will help us control our impulses, right? So this is something you really have to learn how to do and work with. A lot of coaching is about this. We'll do a couple 30-minute sessions in the first week and think about just, all right, what distracts you? What do you have within reach? And what can we do to limit that? Right? Most students are very willing to explore it. They just have never really tried it and haven't had the support from anyone other than mom and dad, which doesn't always feel like support. I think that's one of the biggest benefits of coaching and tutoring is it's people are getting it not from their parents, and so it doesn't fall on deaf ears quite as often. But think about, again, make what's easy hard and what's hard easy. So if you know you've got these well-worn tracks where you go to waste time, right? Maybe you just have to like have an app blocker and say, all right, I'm not getting on Instagram until I'm done with all my work, right? I'm not doing this Discord or this chat or whatever. I'm not texting anyone. These are a few examples of some blockers you can use, but there's a bunch of them. In the past, I've turned off my JavaScript completely, so just so I have my internet pretty limited. There's a bunch of ways you can do it, right? But a lot of this does come back to just phone distraction because we've got the wide world of the internet at our fingertips. I want to distinguish interference from interruptions. So switching tasks, unless it's intentional, will actually degrade your accuracy and efficiency. Because if you're working and then all of a sudden you get a call, right, or you just are distracted for a couple minutes because of a post that you wanted to like and comment on, it's not just you put it down and you're back in. It's a few minutes to recover, right, and get back on that same track. And sometimes we can't get back on the exact same track. It affects our working memory. So some of that stuff we had in our brain leaks out a little bit. It goes from, if we were really processing deeply, all of a sudden we're now in a much shallow level, right? So every switch we have like that does take a toll. And again, most people can't do like music and something else and work. Most of us are monotaskers, not multitaskers. I think this is a really important slide. And again, this is not just dedicating work time to work time. We also need to have dedicated play time, which most students, like junior year, a lot of my students are juniors, just don't have much time for that. So I recognize that. But when you have it, you want to really set it aside. So it's like, okay, I have these, 2 exams later in the week, but on Tuesday, I have a plan with my friends, and I'm just going to do that at that time. So whatever I need to do before and after, I'm going to set it up so that time's only dedicated to having fun. Right? more you can leave these boundaries defined, the higher quality your work and playtime will be, right? And even like when you're eating lunch, just eat lunch. Don't also be on your phone and don't also be doing other stuff, right? Try to do one thing at a time. Right? So gaming is another big one, right? So if it's gaming or it's an app, you have to make that hard to access when you're working, right? And again, it's going to come better internally from a student from themselves than if it's like a punishment from a parent or guardian. If you know that planning is not your strong suit, let's talk about it. Let's think about how can we make it easier, right? So a lot of this is just giving students these tools and options and kind of looking for the twinkle in their eye of, okay, yeah, I think this might work, or I could see the benefit of that. And that's when we kind of jump in. Procrastination is one of the biggest things, always was. And at times in my life, I was a procrastinator for sure. And I kind of would think about like, why? Why am I procrastinating? You know, some people say, well, I do my best work under the gun, under pressure, which is rarely true, right? So think about, why am I really procrastinating? Is it just because like I want to have fun and I don't want to do this to the last second? Or sometimes it's because I have a fear of failure, right? Maybe we have this lack of motivation because we're afraid what we turn out is not going to be good enough. So where am I sinking in bad time? We have to think about how to counter procrastination. So acknowledge it when it happens. Say, oh no, it's happening, right? What am I going to do when that happens? Right? Give yourself a go-to. Um, Rewards and punishment work better from within. So you can negotiate with yourself. I will only allow myself to play a game if I finish this first page of my essay. And again, do hard things early, maybe not first, but second or first, and then reward yourself, right? And then you can do some easier stuff later. We first really got to acknowledge I procrastinate. Why do I do that? A lot of students struggle seeking help. I think I will just encourage you to seek help whenever you feel like this is a societal thing. A lot of us struggle with seeking help or asking for it. But office hours, I mean, teachers generally appreciate when students go there. It shows effort in and of itself. A lot of times students are nervous about that, but I don't think you should be. Same with within reason, emailing your teacher, right? If it's a valid question and you just aren't sure about what's on the test, right? Yeah, it's a good thing, right? If the teacher responds negatively, then that's on them, not you. As a teacher, I would always love it when students ask me questions, right? That's what we're there for, to answer questions. Small groups, as long as everyone's there for the correct reason, right? And motivated, self-motivated, or just a study partner can be good. As a tutor, I'm a high proponent of tutoring, both academic support, but also test prep or AP. Search the internet. I mean, within reason, I think that's good advice, but that's more like if you're not sure of parameters of the test, go look at the syllabus or the study guide, right? And make sure that you've used all the tools at your disposal. The biggest thing is going into a test or a challenge, you don't want to be surprised. No surprises. So if you do your research beforehand and know what to expect, that's how you set yourself up for success. And it's same with ACT, SAT, PSAT. It's like, if we know what's coming, we're going to do well. Identifying the correct people to ask for help can be tough. So think about the teachers you trust the most, and think about maybe even down the road asking for letters of recommendation. And think about the right time, right? It's not the day before the test, it might be a couple of weeks before the test, or it might be even earlier if you find yourself struggling on a certain chapter or section. I always try to make it a safe place to make mistakes in session time and encourage students ask questions if you feel like you're getting lost at all, right? Like, I think I'll know, but let's make sure that we acknowledge that. So as you approach AP season and then finals, let's talk just a little bit about scheduling out your review with break time and not making everything block studying. That is not as productive as incremental blocks. Many executive function coaches love these huge calendars. I like them too. You put them up behind your desk, you write in big letters in Sharpie the dates of the tests or the dates of things that are coming up. including, you know, games or gymnastic events or band or plays and so on, and have a hard copy, right? It's probably good to have it on your phone as well, so you can just pull it up and see it whenever, but have a hard copy in your dedicated study area in your room. And again, I can't emphasize that Google Calendar, I can't emphasize enough how helpful it is. So like all my stuff, all my sessions are on Google Calendar. You can adjust the notification time, whether it notifies you a day before or 10 minutes before or both. So it's a great way to track short-term projects, long-term projects, and then build in playtime, downtime as well. So this might be finals week. You'll see breaks scheduled in. And here you'll see like a full final schedule. Right? I know this student's going to do well because they're managing their time so carefully. Right? Like you see you've got like 5 tests in 4 days. So you better be really careful how you plan before the first test and in the midst of those. Right? After that math test, you got to sleep for a while. You're not going to study right away. And then you can do some Spanish and English. And you got the English test, take a nap, get some coffee, then do Spanish. And then finally we're done. And this is why like executive function coaching often continues for like some people do it into college because freshman year can be a really hard adjustment. We see most of our students probably middle school and then middle of high school, sophomore, junior year, but it's for all ages. So last little bit here is just an acronym for it's just some good tricks to studying. The acronym is GOAT, greatest of all time, or in this case, the G stands for goals. Set specific goals for each class. Set your GPA goal, right? Start thinking about colleges if that's in the mix. Have one safe goal and one stretch goal per session, meaning like if we're doing a EF coaching session, right? We might say, well, our one safe goal this week was, let's make sure we get all our assignments in. And the stretch goal was, can we get a high B on the bio test? But be realistic. If we're getting all C's on biology, maybe we're going to aim for a low B. Incremental progress. You don't have to do it all at once. And some success can really open a lot of doors, right? We see a little success, it can go a long way. The O in GOAT is for organization. There's a lot that goes into this, right? So digitally, your physical space, patterns and a routine, make what's easy hard and what's hard easy, pencil, scratch paper, everything at hand, and then schedule study time and downtime, right? Got to plan ahead, got to be organized. That also comes down to like, how does your backpack look? One of the first things we'll do is dump out your backpack. Let's see what's in there. Eliminate redundancies and let's straighten this up. The A is for attention, removing distractions. Breaks are very, very important, but you want to keep it to like a 10, 15-minute break, not like a 30-minute break, right? So attention on the schoolwork when you're working, limit distractions however you can. And then T is for testing, which can be done in a variety of ways. So testing yourself, you can like practice a presentation in front of the mirror or a dog or a family member or a peer. Writing things down is testing. So when you're studying, you don't just review it, you also want to write it down because that physical act will help you retain it. And again, just teaching it to someone, writing it down, those are all tools that are like probably the most important thing I would say for anyone would be if you're not testing yourself before the test, then you're setting yourself up for failure. So it's not just learning information, it is then proving to yourself that you know it. I see some good questions coming through. We're almost there. Kathleen Kreese's chunk, chew, check method is really the best way to learn. And it's just, again, a reinforcement. You don't want to do the same thing for hours and hours. For every 10 minutes we learn a new thing, the brain actually needs a couple minutes to process that. Right? And so like you learn it and then check it. Right? So we process, we learn something, we chew on it a bit, we process, and then we learn more. Smaller bits, incremental information at a time, and then you verify you've actually understood it before moving forward. A lot of this then comes down to active learning, right? So if you get a perfect copy of the notes from the day, it doesn't really help. If you read them and then rewrite them yourself, okay. But just reading a chapter, not a whole lot, right? That's passive learning. What we want to do is really like figure out, I need someone to teach it to me, right? I need to do an assignment, I need to test myself, right? Otherwise the knowledge will likely not stick in our minds. Again, study partners are good as long as it's not a distraction. Sometimes they can be really awesome and helpful. And again, I'll just say, write things down. So don't just assume you know it. Think to yourself, if I get this question on test day, what am I going to write? And then do it, right? Set yourself up for that test day scenario. And then finally, we'll open up to questions. Here are my just last tips. So APs are coming up. I'm going to show you some of the workshops that Appleruth is giving, but make sure you have checkpoints, right? So like every couple of weeks, like, is my plan working, whether you're working with a coach or on your own, right? You just got to check in. That's metacognition, thinking about what you're doing and what's working and what isn't. And then remember that we are going to make mistakes, right? This is not an easy process. And even if you're gaining skills, it's not going to always feel like, oh yeah, boom, nailed it. You know, all my EF skills now, they're all great. It's really easy to encounter failure and then spiral a bit. So we need to build that frustration tolerance. And just, if things aren't working, just be gentle. Think, okay, why not? Come from a place of curiosity. And just acknowledge that all this is a process. No, most people do not get it right away, right? Especially if it's something we know we struggle with. So again, be patient and gentle with yourself and just try different things until you find the comfort zone. And it can take a long time. Again, these are our three main areas. So if your student's struggling in school with a certain subject or needs support on ACT, SAT, PSAT, and so on, or executive function coaching, please reach out to us. We do these very cool mind print exams, which is basically like a mock test for executive function. And so you can do a diagnostic session and then set up with one of our great coaches. We usually start with like 30-minute sessions a couple times a week. And the goal is to space that out, right? So that you're only meeting with a student once a week and then once every couple weeks because they're really getting it down. And then last thing I would just want to pull up before we do questions is this, which is the list of Appleruth's AP workshops that are coming up. So we just had one today. You can see chemistry is coming up later this week, US history, calculus, and a few others. These are all going to be like our expert tutors who've been doing AP exams forever, so they should be very valuable. Of course, we have in-person tutoring as well, but I think these workshops are probably great ways to kick off AP review. And they'll tell you about the right resources to use and just kind of look at the layout of the test itself. So you can call this number or visit appleruth.com/AP. And we've got some time, so let's open it up for questions. All right, so the first question is, I have a student who makes good plans, which is awesome, but has a hard time executing them. Can you offer any practical strategies for him to follow through on his plans? Yeah, I mean, without meeting the person, it's hard, but generally it falls into one of three things. So if you plan ahead, but then aren't doing the execution and actually completing the task, it's usually either task initiation. So for me, that in the past was a problem of kind of delaying the beginning of something. I know I can do it, but I'm delaying starting it. Once I started it, I was fine. Some people have more problem with the persistence, so they can start it, but then they kind of get complacent and distracted. And then for others, they can do everything but the completion. The task completion is a barrier for some reason. So I think it's a lot about thinking about, okay, where is my downfall? I have this plan, what part didn't work? So I would dissect it like that and then think, okay, well, if this part of the plan didn't work, how can I shift it? And it's going to be a series of incremental tweaks, and it's probably going to be frustrating. But I would say the real strategy is just break it down into the little bitty parts, right? And think, okay, I had this plan and here's where it fell through. What can I do differently? Why did it fall through? What didn't I like about that? And so on. So it's just from curiosity. Next question is, on average, how many hours do students spend with you for EF coaching? Can they start with 1 hour and then see where they go from there? Yeah, I mean, I've had students who we actually only needed a session or two. That's rare, but there was a student who was like, well, I know what I do. I go on this thing and I go on Discord and I'm constantly just chatting, and then I'll do it for an hour and not realize I spent that much time. And as soon as we figured out a way to block it for him, he was good. Other students will need longer, but yeah, I think a session or two with a good EF coach can do absolute wonders. Because when I was in high school, I don't know, I don't think executive functioning was a thing, that like a term, and I certainly didn't think about the way I was doing things. So if a student has that and it clicks like with the right person and they get the buy-in of, oh yeah, if I think about what I'm doing here, I can really change the way I plan. I absolutely think a half hour, an hour can go a long way, and then just see what happens, of course. And yes, I do personally do executive function coaching. I do a lot of test prep. So usually I do the coaching for students who either their parents ask or I kind of notice they need something. And so I'm already working with them. But yeah, I do some, and you can request to work with me individually. The next one is, do we do group executive functioning coaching? For high schoolers, I don't think we have groups, but it's actually an interesting idea. The reason that we don't right now is because it's so nuanced and individualized. So what works for one student, may not work for another. But as you can see today, there are certainly tools that will help everyone. So right now we don't have any, but I'm sure that, I imagine in the future we could arrange some workshops or a group EF class or presentation. I think it's a good idea. But as of right now, it's all one-on-one, generally 30-minute sessions. Really good questions. We're open for another minute. If you guys feel like you've gotten what you came for, hopefully it was very helpful. Feel free to take off, and I appreciate you joining. I'll just leave it open for a few more minutes to see if any questions come in. Of course, if you do have questions that occur after, you can email info@Alparuth or call that number. People are very helpful there. And most of the people who work in client services have been tutors at some point or are tutors. So they really kind of know the ins and outs of our system and our coaching. All right, seeing no questions, I think let's call it an evening. Oh, here's one. Oh, just a thank you. Thanks back at you. You're very welcome. Appreciate y'all joining, and hope you have a wonderful rest of the week. Thanks so much.